So today I want to begin with, I've got really two parts that I want to speak about today. One is kind of an introduction to the second part, but I think you'll see where I'm going as we do that. So John 8, verse 12 says that Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. He that follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life." So Jesus is the light of the world. But there is another light of the world, and that's a part that I think has been misdirected a lot in our world of Christianity, and you get this from the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5 verses 1 and 2. Jesus said, "And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and he taught them." And of course, this is the setting of Jesus speaking about the Sermon on the Mount, about the Beatitudes. And then he talks about the salt and the light. But there are actually two sermons with the Beatitudes in them. I'm not sure if anyone knows that, but or if everyone knows that. But this sermon in Matthew 5, 1 to 2 is one of them. But Luke also reports on this. But in this one with Matthew, they're on a mountain, and with Luke, they're on a plain. They're not on a mountain. So that's why most scholars say these are two different sermons. But Jesus is just repeating again similar information. Luke actually gives some, but Matthew gives more. But the interesting thing about it is, in both sermons, he was speaking to a great multitude and not just his disciples. So in Matthew 4:25 it says, "And there followed him great multitudes of people from Galilee and from Decapolis and from Jerusalem and from Judea, from beyond Jordan." And then Luke, verse 6 to 17 says, "And a great multitude of the people out of all of Judea and Jerusalem and from the east, from the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon, who came to hear him." The big point of this is, why were they coming? It says because everywhere he went, he healed all of them. This isn't just like we see in some cases where Jesus really walks past a lot of sick people, but he goes to one and he heals him. But in this setting, and this is shortly after he chooses his disciples, as he's traveling, he's healing every single one of them. And so an enormous crowd grows, and that's what creates the multitude that he's speaking to here. Says, "And he healed them all." So in both sermons, he was speaking to them about the Beatitudes. And so in Matthew, there's 9 of those Beatitudes in Matthew. Blessed are they, blessed are they. Only 4 of them are in Luke. But 4 of the woes are also in Luke. So Luke 6:24 says, "But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full, for you shall hunger. Woe to you that laugh now, but you shall mourn and weep." And he's really mixing in what is always true. Those who are of us who are trying to live in the Beatitudes, living the righteous life of Christ, are surrounded with people like this. And so he also, in the Luke sermon, talks to them. And he says, if you are one that you're rich, but perhaps maybe not legally or legitimately, you've received your consolation already in this life, because there's nothing waiting for you in the next. So they who are rich, full, and laugh at the expense of humanity reject the Beatitudes, but God has taken notice. So in both sermons, we get to this subject of the salt and the light. Actually, Matthew brings this out more than Luke. Matthew 5:13 says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its savor, how then shall it be salted? It is therefore good for nothing but to be cast out, to be trodden underfoot." Then he said, "You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do men light a candle." Excuse me, my laptop suddenly automatically started recording something I'm saying here. Get off my screen. Okay, I guess I'll record the whole thing. How did it happen? All right, well, I won't worry about it now. A city that is set on the hill cannot be hidden. Neither do men that light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it gives light to all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, and that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who's in heaven. So the point I want to make about this message is to the multitudes that gathered, not just to the disciples. Up in Matthew, they came up on the mountain. Jesus called his disciples to him, but the multitude is around him. And that's when he begins to speak about all of this. So he's speaking to the multitude. Multitude is mixed. They're not disciples. They're a group of people that are following because they've either been healed, or they've got a relative who's been healed, or they were hearing along the way, the crowd gathers. And that's always a mixed bag. You never know what you have in it. But that's who he's speaking to. And so Jesus was telling us in these passages that all of humans are the light of the world. That's what humanity is. That's who God created to take dominion over this earth. And that we are the light of this world. Christianity is not about those who have the light and those who don't. In a way it is, because we know we have the light of Jesus Christ in us. But the light, that second light I'm talking about, as humans in this world, that is something that God has placed in this world to make sense of what this world is all about. That's the only thing that makes sense. I mean, some people might say the world would be such a nice place if it weren't for people. So let's get rid of all the people. Now what kind of a world do you have? Who wants to be in that world? We are the ones that add flavor. We're the ones that add salt. So misconceptions about this, in my opinion, have had a devastating effect upon the world. And unfortunately, it's come from a mixed and misdirected message about Christianity. It's placed the church, first of all, behind four walls separated from the world. It conveys the message that without Christ, you are not a light to the world. And that's not true. You are a light to the world. It's like saying, if you're outside the can, you're not a sardine. If you're not in the orchestra, you're not a musician. If you're not on the field, you're not a ball player. If you're not in the store, you're not a shopper. There's something about a message to all of humanity that you are the light of the world and I created you. That's the message that should settle on humanity, but that message has been lifted out and replaced with, you're not the light of the world, you don't have the light of the world, and so as a result, in a belief that humans don't continue to live after they die, as a result of looking at it this way, it's allowed for the devil's playground in a very dark imagination of humanity. It's resulted in a belief that humans don't continue to live after they die and that this life is all that there is. I might as well eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow I die. Worst of all, others who get in my way are a competition that must be eliminated, and creates a very hard world to live in. Those who don't have the light of Christ within them are confronted with a life that is suggested to them that is separated from God. Yes, they are separated from God. They're born that way. We all are. Wouldn't you like to not be separated? But this message has settled on humanity in such a way as people will say, who do you think you are telling me that? Are you a good two shoes? Are you better than I am? They can't seem to get past the message. Let me give you the correct concept of what Jesus as the light of the world, and we are the light of the world. God has created all humans as the light of the world. Satan has done his best to either put out that light or at least to dim it. John 8:12 says, "Then spoke Jesus again to them, saying, I am the light of the world." God turns the light back on when Jesus comes in. That's the only difference. The only difference between a Christian and a non-Christian is that the Christian is forgiven. Non-Christians remain unforgiven until they repent. But that does not make them less of a human being. That does not make them less of a light of the world. They might be allowing themselves to reflect a very darkness of their light that's being dimmed, and maybe in some it's been put out. But they don't have that sense of, I belong to God because He created me. We are all one blood in all the earth. That message, that experience, and especially the positive message that, you know what, we can turn that light back on if you like. I'm not trying to tell you that I've got something you don't have it. I'm trying to tell you that I can help you have that light that within you. We can turn it back on. When I first got saved, one of the ways I expressed to people in my first testimony, as I started telling people about how I'd gotten saved, as I started going to a church, and I went to the church, and before I knew Christ, before I was born again, I looked around the church and I said, some of those people looked like to me like they had 200-watt bulbs inside of them. And I could tell the ones that did and the ones that didn't. I knew that without even being a Christian. And that's what I recognized that, and I knew that's what I was looking for. And you know my story, I was afraid to try it for fear that my light wouldn't come on. Anyway, today I want to talk about how Satan has obscured the light of humanity. Now, this is a little bit different twist than I think you might suspect you would be about. Because there's an issue today about conspiracies, and what I want to talk about is the history behind those conspiracies. Because in that history is how Satan has managed to bend this world into what it is today. And it came through very identifiable means. And it really helps to understand something of what those were. World leaders and captains of industry desperately needed a way to justify their behavior for maximizing profits and minimizing competition, making more money and killing your competition. And intellectual gatekeepers were needed who could sell their activity as progressive and necessary. They were desperate because some of them were cheating to maintain an advantage over everyone else, and that left them no choice but to do the same. They found these gatekeepers from the leading scientific, economic, and mathematical thinkers as far back as the early 1800s. And I want to talk about a few of those today. What they found in those thinkers was scientific justification for a Malthusian, zero-sum, closed entropic belief that our world systems would collapse unless something was done to stop it. Malthusian. What is Malthusian? What Malthusian is it is named after a man named Thomas Robert Malthus back in 1798. And he came up with a concept that he promoted and even made charts about it. It says simply this: population tends to increase at a faster rate than its means of subsistence, and that unless it is checked by moral restraint or by disease, famine, war, or other disasters, widespread poverty and degradation will inevitably result. Zero-sum Malthusian means you look at this world and say limited resources, too many people, unsustainable. What are we going to do to fix that? That's what Malthusian is. Basically, to them, the stakes are too high to play nice. You can't just do what you're supposed to do and be a good little person and succeed if others are cheating. And the stakes are too high to let this thing get out of control. So I need to jump in the game. Maybe I'll have to do some of the underhanded stuff too, but maybe that will then help me contribute. Some politicians would say, well, you have to do something. It's politically expedient that you do some things, or otherwise you're out of the game and you can't do the good things you want to do. And so let's do some of the bad things in order to do the good things. People are the problem. Actually, the stakes are too high to play nice. Amplified to also include economic production. So Malthus had this thing about population, and it's going too fast. We got to do something about it. But that has become amplified over the decades to include economic production of the world. We must save the planet at all costs for the survival of our species. Global warming, population control, fossil fuels are just a few examples of how that's been presented. So people are the problem. The world is suffering and needs to be fixed. It is unsustainable to try to fix it with humanity as it now is. People are incapable of governing themselves, and because of the competitive interest across the spectrum of the world, never-ending wars and conflict will never end. The world is like a computer that needs an upgrade if it is to survive. That's what's in the mind of world leaders and captains of industry. They're looking at our world and we're saying, we can't keep doing what we've always done, or we're going to continue to get what we've always gotten. We have to do something different. And it's beginning to look more and more like we're going to have to go under the table to do it, because we can't do it out in front of everybody and doing the way it's what we think would be effective. So in their search for this, the thinkers of the past, to give them some way to give them a progressive presentation of what they're doing under the table, and these thinkers that they found, they gave them what they needed to become a scientific technocracy that could be justified in using unethical and immoral behavior for the long-term survival of our species. See, it's not like you have a bunch of people who are just so greedy and they want to get what they want. A lot of these powerful people in our world really do want to leave this place a better place than they found it. It's not like they are the light or they're not the light and we're the light. It's not like they're in darkness and we're in the light. It's like they would like to be in the light as much as they understand, and they're trying to do good, and they got in the game to do good. And how many people went to Congress to do this? Mm-hmm. Only to be hit with a firewall of what they got hit with to compromise them. With the power their money provides them, the wealthy people, powerful people of our world, especially when grouped with others of the same status in mind, they seek to rule the world to make it a better place. Without God, they work to make a world like their godless minds think it should be, with everyone structured and in order under their rule. This is for the betterment of the world in their minds. So it's not like they lack integrity. They really do believe this, and they really are trying their very best. I don't know, I don't like Bill Gates because of what he put me through with his operating system back in the early days. I was sure the devil had sent him. But I don't know in his mind or any of these other technocrats how much is sincere and how much is not. I do know they're all very aware of how under the table they are about what they're doing. They cannot allow everyone to see what they're doing. But the reason they're doing that is because they honestly believe that that is what is necessary for the survival of our world and our species. Here's just one quote that captures the thinking of so many of them. It is highly probable that the whole universe around us will die the heat death, in which the world shall be reduced to one vast temperature equilibrium in which nothing really new ever happens. There will be nothing left but a drab uniformity. That's what they fear. That's what they think, that this world is so overcrowded right now that when you drive between here and Arizona, that somehow all that open space doesn't exist, that we're just right elbow to elbow everywhere. Anybody who's taken a day trip and driven for 8 hours in one day, you look around you and say, there's a lot of space still left here. And there's a lot of water under the entire earth, not just in the cities. So there is concern, and early thinkers produced a concept that Satan was able to use to start putting as seed in the minds of very powerful people. We live in a Malthusian world of limited resources, and if you don't fight for it to make sure that it comes out right, we're going to be in trouble. So ultimately, what emerged was an explanation of how our world began and how it operates with no consideration for God. Is there a conspiracy among them to take control of the world? Well, I think there is a conspiracy in terms of what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it, and they're cooperating together to do it. And they're certainly not letting us in on it. I have not been invited into the meetings, and I'm not participant of any grants or multi-million-dollar backslapping contracts for my favors. So I think there is a conspiracy in that regard. But were they just men in search of an excuse for unethical and immoral behavior that Satan has been able to use to take control of those who do not love the truth? I think that also is true. If you don't want to know Jesus Christ, and if you've rejected that, if you've never heard of it, understandable. But if you have heard it and you've chosen not to explore it, then that puts you into a very vulnerable position of not wanting to go after the truth, not wanting to seek the truth of that. And it makes it possible for Satan then to work in your imagination to turn it dark instead of light, to steal the light out of it and put darkness in its place. And that happens in multitudes of ways. If you're a powerful person, you own a business, or if you're a powerful politician, if you're a powerful educator, if you're a powerful gatekeeper, all that you consider valuable and important to you, anyone can come and say, I can kill that if you don't cooperate. And do you want your baby to die? And that's the age-old game that's existed from the beginning of time. So in this presentation, you're going to hear from 4 of those intellectual gatekeepers who world leaders and captains of industry have used to justify their immoral and unethical behavior to give us the world that we are now living in. I got an introduction to this from an article I just read recently. I don't know, maybe some of you even got it, but it's from a June 9th, 2021 Global Research article by Matthew Ehret, E-H-R-E-T. I don't know how you say that for sure, but he was a journalist, a lecturer, and a founder of the Canadian Patriot. And he had this introduction, which I thought was quite good. He said this: "Today, I would like to trace the roots of those poisonous ideas which characterize today's unipopular paradigm that masquerades behind a billionaire-authored Great Reset of world civilization," something you've heard me refer to as the Dark World Order. In this reset, we are told by the likes of Klaus Schwab that a 4th industrial revolution will usher in not only vast automation and artificial intelligence operations at every level of society, but also a merging of humanity with the machines. Figures like Elon Musk, Google's Ray Kurzweil, assert this merging is needed in order to stay relevant in the next phase of our evolution. Davos man Yuval Harari echoed that the levers of evolution will now be moved from the randomness of nature into the new gods running Google, Facebook, and the World Economic Forum. And so what they're really saying is that there's a change happening that's moving us from natural causes that are in this world that make things happen into engineered causes that can make it happen the way it's supposed to. So this Borg-like deterministic faith in the human-machine synthesis that pervades the thinking of all modern transhumanists is both cultish, creepy, and just plain wrong. However, without a proper evaluation into the historic roots of these ideas that threaten to derail global civilization into a dystopian collapse, it is impossible to understand anything fundamental about the past 120 years of human experience, let alone see where the fatal flaws are within the Great Reset transhumanist operating system. In other words, whether you understand any of this or not, you're being forced to experience it. And there is an opportunity to understand, have a foundation of understanding that will help you to rest your faith upon, that it may use that as a springboard into what God intends instead of what Satan intends. Let's enter the Huxleys. 3 Huxleys: Thomas, Aldous, and Julian. Thomas Huxley is the grandfather. It all began with him in the late 1800s. He hoped to reestablish the British Empire as the only unipolar power on the earth when he established what became known as the X Club. He is known as Darwin's bulldog for his advocacy of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Through the X Club, Huxley attempted to not only unify all branches of sciences under one descriptive model devoid of any concept of God, that tells you the roots for him and his sons, his grandsons, but he also attempted to use this new control of the definition of scientific natural law to justify an aggressive new imposition of imperial political economy onto the world. Remember what world leaders and captains of industry are desperate for? They're looking for a justified way to be that power, and that's why Julian Huxley is one of so many that appealed to them to build their philosophy on a foundation of credible knowledge of qualified, credible people to say, he agrees with me, I'm doing what he says, and that gives me some standing to credibly and with my engineered integrity can do it. So later in 1930, the Josiah Macy Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation began funneling money towards eugenics research in both the US and in Germany. Macy conferences on cybernetics met every 6 months to bring together psychiatrists, biologists, neurologists, computer engineers, sociologists, economists, mathematicians, and even theologians. What were they doing? They were gathering gatekeepers. One of the key leaders of these conferences later became the leading controller of the CIA's MK Ultra program, which ran from 1952 to 1973, as a multi-million-dollar covert operation designed to study the effects of de-patterning both individuals and groups by using mixtures of electroshock therapy, torture, and drugs. Another leader of the Macy conferences later became the innovator of game theory, which played a dominant role in both military planning of the Vietnam War as well as in economic systems for the next 70 years. Still another leader became the leading psychiatrist from London's Tavistock Clinic and member of the Frankfurt School that organized a concerted program, and listen to this, to eliminate the sickness of national patriotism, belief in truth, and family love throughout the Cold War period. You wonder why things got so weird during Vietnam and all the stuff that began happening in our country? Later in 1946, Julian Huxley created UNESCO, United Nations Education, Science, and Cultural Organization, where the mandate to make the unthinkable become thinkable guided the restoration of a new eugenics movement during the Cold War, a movement promising to improve the genetic quality of the human population. One of the ugly stepchildren of that movement was Margaret Sanger, who began in the reproductive rights movement in America around the same time that the Nazis came to power in Germany with their dream of building a master race. Ultimately, she became the founder of the American Birth Control League, later named Planned Parenthood. As an advocate of selective breeding, which is what eugenics is all about, she advanced the controversial Negro Project, and in her autobiography advocated for eugenics' approach to breeding for the gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extinction of defective stocks through sterilization. She wanted to eliminate those who were unfit to reproduce and those she saw as a burden on society. She referred to them as, I quote, "those human weeds that threaten the blooming of the finest flowers of American civilization." In other words, we have a wonderful country here if we could just get rid of some of the people in it. To her, making the unthinkable become thinkable was to sell selective breeding and abortion as solutions to problems that were preventing civilization from flourishing. Remember, they need that cover to justify their behavior. Legalized abortion, made possible by the 1973 Supreme Court decision of Roe v. Wade, was just the beginning of her hope for solutions. This is the worldview that has emerged in a world without God. So let's talk about the dance of math and physics. Who leads and who follows? In the opening months of the new century, a major event took place that went far to apply Thomas Huxley's mission. The Future of Mathematics Conference of August 1900 was a global event attracting over 160 of the greatest mathematicians who wished to tackle cutting-edge problems in science and deal with the relationship of physics and mathematics. Obviously, these two fields danced together, but the question remained which would lead and which would follow. Considering the fact that the world population at that time still numbered well below 2 billion, the density of scientific discoveries across all domains was occurring at a rate unseen in human history. From new discoveries in biology, embryology, atomic physics, electromagnetism, aerodynamics, and chemistry, the answer to the math versus physics question was increasingly becoming obvious. The fact was that the growth of human knowledge was fast outpacing the limits of the mathematical language used by scientists. With time, new mathematical systems would be developed to describe the new creative discoveries being made. But no one could deny that creative thought, which I call the light world order, was leading in this dance. What was also understandable was that the new ideas were improving the conditions of countless lives through leaps in scientific and technological progress. When the Industrial Revolution came on our country, there was such, and the end of World War II, there was such a tsunami of enthusiasm about a progressive new future and a new world. And so it was all light. And everyone embraced it, and everyone said, look where we're headed. We're finally past this war, and now everybody can get a job. Now we're going to make money. Now we're going to live. Now we're going to get on with things. So enter David Hilbert and Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell of Cambridge University and mathematician David Hilbert of Göttingen University, Germany, they helped to shape a new paradigm about what this is. They were both enamored with the eugenics movement. Both played leading roles in sabotaging science during the 1900 Paris conference, and whose ideas are inextricably linked to the later evolution of eugenics, cybernetics, and transhumanism. The duo aimed at nothing less than the reduction of the entire universe into a series of finite, internally consistent mathematical proportions and axioms. Does the word anal mean anything to you? Anality. It's got to be just right. I can't tolerate anything else but the perfection of it. So during the conference, Hilbert announced that 23 problems for mathematicians would need to be solved by mathematicians, mathematics would need to be solved by mathematicians of the 20th century. Bertrand Russell took up the challenge. After 13 years, he solved all 23 problems and published them in the form of Principia Mathematica. The name was chosen explicitly as a homage to Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica, published 200 years earlier. Newton came on, but his mathematics now was inadequate. So now Bertrand Russell has come on and he said, here's the new math. It became known as a closed system entropic mathematics. Russell's view can be seen in reflecting this in this 1903 statement. That man is the product of causes that had no prevision of the end they were achieving, that his origin, his growth, his hopes and fears, his loves, and his beliefs are but the outcomes of accidental collocations of atoms, that no fire, no heroism, no intensity of thought and feeling can preserve individual life beyond the grave, that all the labors of the ages of the devotion, of the inspiration, all the noonday brightness of human genius are designed to extinction in the waste death of the solar system, and that the whole terrible temple of man's achievement, must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of a universe in ruins. All these things, if not quite beyond dispute, are yet nearly certain that no philosophy which rejects them can hope to stand. Only within the scaffolding of these truths, only on the firm foundation of unyielding despair, can the soul's habitation henceforth be safely built. Wow, now there's an outlook on life, isn't it?
I don't know.
So he acquired a perspective of the world that was Malthusian, zero-sum, entropic, meaning that limited resources, limited ways to maintain, sustain our world and our population, is that basically he was saying it was all going to go to hell in a handbasket unless we do something about it. And he said it's on that foundation you have to build whatever solutions we're going to come up with to fix it. Not all scientists agreed with his misanthropic views. During the same period of Hilbert and Russell, Albert Einstein did not share their views of unyielding despair, but viewed the world with beautiful insight and passion to seek the unknown. He stated, quote, "I want to know how God created this world. I am not interested in this or that other phenomena. In the spectrum of this or that element, I want to know his thoughts. The rest are just details." Different look on life. But all the positive enthusiasm of a reviving world after World War II and the Industrial Revolution creating so much automation and things that were going to help humanity, all that enthusiasm was now starting to be captured by world gatekeeping thinkers who were presenting a concept of it that suggested it's not that way, but it's limited, it's diminishing, and if we don't do something about to save it, we're going to lose it all. So Russell's view hinged upon his obsession with mathematical equilibrium in all things. When applied to society, he was a devout Malthusian and a lifelong promoter of eugenics and population control. One of his many displays of this was made in his 1923 Prospects of Industrial Civilization, where he stated, "Socialism, especially international socialism, is only possible as a stable system if the population is stationary or nearly so. A slow increase might be coped with by improvements in agricultural methods, but a rapid increase must in the end reduce the whole population to penury. The white population of the world will soon cease to increase. The Asiatic races will be longer and the Negroes still longer before their birth rate falls sufficiently to make their numbers stable without help of war and pestilence. Until that happens, the benefits aimed at by socialism can only be partially realized, and the less prolific races will have to defend themselves against the more prolific by methods which are disgusting even if necessary. Absolute racism. He saw a world that needed what he called a stable population. What do you mean by that? Controlled population. If we're getting overpopulated, we've got to do something to stop it. And if that means under the table we need to manufacture some means to make that happen, so be it, because the stakes are too high. We're going to lose our world if we don't. When you think that way, and when you believe that way, and you're a very smart person, that will make you look at the world much differently than if you look at the world the way God created it. Unlimited resources, absolute freedom of choice, a complete paradise as we cooperate with one another. Whatever one person lacks, another person can help with. If you look at life that way, what a wonderful world this is. You meet people on an escalator going up and down in a department store, and you say hi, and they smile back, and they say hi. That's what life really is. It's not the person with beady eyes and small glasses, and he's looking around like he's ready to kill someone, and he's trying to figure out how can I survive all these people around me. Russell believed that a global stationary society would require educational reform. Listen to this. Russell calls for not one, but two separate modes of education. One for the elite master class, who will become rulers, and one for the inferior slave class. His 1930 quote in the publication of the Scientific Outlook said this: "The scientific rulers will provide one kind of education for ordinary men and women, and another for those who are to become holders of scientific power. Ordinary men and women will be expected to be docile, industrious, punctual, thoughtless, and contented," much the way we were taught when we were in grade school. Perfect attendance, don't chew gum in class, cooperate, don't fight. Of these qualities, probably contentment will be considered the most important. In order to produce it, all the researches of psychoanalysis, behaviorism, and biochemistry will be brought into play. All the boys and girls will learn from an early age to be what is called cooperative, to do exactly what everybody else is doing. Initiative will be discouraged in these children, and insubordination without being punished will be scientifically trained out of them. Except for the one matter of loyalty to the world state and to their own order, Russell explained, members of the governing class will be encouraged to be adventurous and full of initiative. It will be recognized that it is their business to improve scientific technique and to keep the manual workers contented by means of continual new amusements. Adventurous and full of initiative. And they will have millions, if not billions, and sometimes trillions of dollars thrown at them to help them do that. Through grants, through business deals, through you name it. Through favoritism, through the club. Because they all went to the Ivy League colleges, the universities, that the slave class can't qualify to get into. The next player, Norbert Wiener. Norbert Wiener. Wiener was a 17-year-old disciple of Bertrand Russell and David Hilbert. Russell taught him logic and philosophy, while Hilbert taught him differential equations. He became obsessed with Russell's logical, closed, Malthusian thinking. He was the first to predict the inevitability of global information control through the use of machine learning. At that time, he had no idea about the internet, no concept of social media, no idea of how this could come to be. He just saw that it would be inevitable. He was joined by other mathematicians with theories of machine learning. Some of you may know the names: Alan Turing, Oscar Morgenstern, John von Neumann, and Claude Shannon. They were all in a club of people who had great momentum at their time in influencing the entire world. Here's what they believed. They were all united by the unwavering faith that a human mind was a mixture of bestial impulses guided by closed system machine logic and nothing more. In a computer, the whole is but the sum of the parts, and so too must it be in all information systems, including human brains, ecosystems, and the universe as a whole. Metaphysical principles like soul, purpose, God, justice, and free will had no place in the minds of these human calculators. They saw us very much like Mengele did in Nazi Germany in the camps. He saw them as a resource to be experimented on to gain new knowledge and nothing more. So enter the deep state. The attraction of cybernetics to scientific dictatorship who desires total omniscience and omnipotence is the belief that only the helmsman of a large boat need have an idea of the whole. Everyone else need only understand their local compartmentalized role. So he applied cybernetics to the organization of economic systems. Vast, complex bureaucracies emerged with only small nodes of helmsmen embedded within the newly emerging deep state complex who had access to a vision of the whole. This was the perfect operating system for a supernatural technocracy to use to control the levers of the New World Order. In other words, you don't put very many people in a position where they know the whole picture. You divide them and split them, and so that no one person has a picture of the whole. Very high, powerful, influential people in this world only have pieces of information given to them, and they believe they've been given all of the information. And so they operate with that authority, thinking they are at the top of the food chain. I think our President Joe Biden thinks that he's probably at the top of the food chain when he probably doesn't realize he hasn't been given all the information. Everyone that he works with probably is being handled the same way. That's why in our country and in countries of the world, those who are running the countries are not the ones running the countries. They're not being given the whole picture. The people who have the whole picture are the people who have the whole picture of the whole world. And there aren't that many of them, by the way. So let's talk about Pierre Elliott Trudeau and Alexander King. Trudeau is the Prime Minister of Canada. Back in 1968 to 72, he shaped a vast cybernetics revolution of the Canadian government. At a November 1969 conference on cybernetics in government, here's what he said. We are aware that the many techniques of cybernetics, by transforming the control function and the manipulation of information, will transform our whole world. With this knowledge, we are wide awake, alert, capable of action. No longer are we blind, inert powers of fate. In other words, you get into office and you have power given to you by the power of the vote put there. But once you get into office, you are now operating on a different level, and you're not operating out of the authority of that vote. You're operating out of the authority of what's being given to you by your ability to now, instead of being subject to the whims of the voters, they're now subject to your absolute authority and power. He worked closely with King to form the Canadian Club of Rome and allocated money to fund his MIT study called Limits to Growth. A now famous computer model chart from that study in 1972 has become the global Bible for the modern environmental movement. There's a chart that came out of that was so graphic, and it was only one little chart. I mean, you could put it on half a page, that big. But what it said in a chart, in a graph, so captured the minds of world leaders and the gatekeepers of this world, the captains of industry, because it gave them a graphical way of identifying a belief in a world that authorized them, because of the desperation of how we're losing our world. It authorized them to do whatever's necessary to save it. We might have to kill 10 million people to save 100 million, but so be it. If you want to make an omelet, sometimes you have to break, if you want to, how does it go?
Break a few eggs.
You have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. So I would say 10 million is not just a few eggs. Unless something was done to intervene, it predicted, this chart predicted the supposed reduction of world population through the entropy of a dying world. It became the means to justify the motivation of moving humanity's desire to develop under a light world order to rest in mathematical equilibrium, Malthusian, under a dark world order. So finally, last character we want to enter is Julian Huxley. He's the last of the Huxley brothers. Aldous was his brother. Aldous wrote the book Brave New World in 1932, and coupled with that, along with George Orwell's book 1984, both were thought to be prophetic commentaries on economic, political, and social matters. Julian was a key leader in the Macy's Cybernetics conferences and the founder of UNESCO. The moral of, and this is a quote of his, the moral for UNESCO is clear. The task laid upon it of promoting peace and security can never be wholly realized through the means assigned to it, that is, the means of education, science, and culture. It must envision some form of world political unity, whether through a single world government or otherwise, as the only certain means of avoiding war. In its educational program, it can stress the ultimate need for a world political unity and familiarize all people with the implications of the transfer of full sovereignty from separate nations to a world organization. So enter opinion making and social engineering. After World War II ended, under Julian's leadership, the Macy Foundation held conferences on problems of health and human relations in Germany from 1949 to 1950. The goal was to persuade the German people that the whole fault of Hitler's rise to power was not to be found in looking for international conspiracies or City of London or Wall Street manipulation, but rather in the authoritarian psychological genetic disposition of the German people themselves. Let's blame Hitler on the German people. Let's make the victim pay the price for what we've done to them. Another leader joined with Julian to become an innovator of a new brainwashing technique called sensitivity training. It relied heavily on the use of guilt complexes and group pressure to break the will of a target group, either in a classroom or in the workplace, and absorbing any original thinkers into states of groupthink. It also became the foundation for today's critical theory doctrines that threaten to undermine the entire scope of Western civilization. While we were camping down in Rio Doso this last week, we were there with some retirees. One of them was a couple of them were retired from Sandia, but I asked him, the one who just recently retired from there, I said, how's Sandia doing? He said, not good. He said, they're coming on with all this racial theory stuff, this critical race theory, and they're making people participate in so much of what is going on in this world. And it just, all the Sandians that he knew, he said, we're just trying to figure out how do we survive this. It was Julian that coined the term transhumanism in 1957. This is the key word right now, transhumanism. Enhance human bodies through the merger of man and machine. That's what transhumanism is. Enhance human bodies through the merger of man and machine. What's the point? To eliminate the limitations of human biology through science and technology. In other words, now that we're in a dystopian, Malthusian, zero-sum dark world order, we have to somehow realize the problem are the people. And if we want to have a better world, we have to make better people. And we have to eliminate some that can't be fixed, and we have to fix those that are already here that we don't have to eliminate. So, basically what it means is we're looking for an ideal version of ourselves. Artificial intelligence, even uploading ourselves to a server, eliminate diseases through gene editing, create life in a petri dish, create designer babies, create new humans through gene splicing, make super soldiers, prolong life possibly forever. After all, if I can live outside of my body in a circuit somewhere, then can't that circuit, just as long as it has electricity, keep me going on forever? See, that's what's in the thinking of so many people. And they're not idiots, and they're not being dishonest. They're not being less than real with what they believe. They really believe this because they have been sold into this Malthusian perspective of our world. And they have now been given tools to say, here's some things you can do. Don't let everybody else know you're doing them. But you can do some stuff now that can really fix this problem. What are some indicators in our society? How about the movies? Predictive programming. What movies have come out to predict, to place the thoughts in your mind and get you used to the idea of transhumanism? Let's talk about them. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 1931. Let's put some electricity on this corpse and bring him back to life. 2001 Space Odyssey, 1968. $6 Million Man, 1974 to 78. Blade Runner, 1982. RoboCop, 1987. Terminator, 1991. Lawnmower Man, 1992. Johnny Mnemonic, 1995. Star Trek Voyager and the Borg. Remember the Borg? Complete transhumanists. 1995-2002. Bicentennial Man, 1999. The Matrix, 1999. iRobot, 2004. Iron Man, 2008. Splice, 2009. Elysium, 2013. Transcendence, 2014. Limitless. Remember the guy that took the pill and all of a sudden he could think like a computer? 2004. Improve the humanity and you can improve the world. That's the insanity that this has turned into. Instead of accepting the creation that God created and then looking to Him to make this, why would God choose such limited human specimens to live through on this world? That's what they don't even want a concept of. Ex Machina, 2015, and we're now 2021, so there's about 6 years more movies that have come out. But what are some other indications in our world? I mean, Hollywood has produced how many films there? Probably, I don't know how many are just listed off, but all of those films are just a smattering of what Hollywood has put out. But those films are so focused on transhumanism. That tells you that someone who knows the whole story over the entire earth, that tells you that he knows something that he wants to produce in the imaginations, in the dark imaginations of our world. You have a problem. Let's fix your problem. We need to improve your body. Let's figure out how we can do that. And so before we can do that, though, you're going to try to make some efforts yourself. Body piercings and tattoos, plastic surgery, world of makeup, world of clothing, world of drugs. If we can just take some drugs, maybe that'll make me a more livable human being. Not that there aren't some drugs that we have to take, but the world of drugs that this world is taking right now to try to survive in this world. See, this transhumanist thing is very much alive. There's something called the U.S. Transhumanist Party, started to begin in 2014. Transhumanism is the foundation for population reduction, spelled out, now I said by reduction, spelled out in the Agenda 2021 and the Agenda 2030 documents. If you've never heard of those, go look at them and you'll be flabbergasted by what they say, because they're talking about how do we reduce this population to a more sustainable population in our world. And let's not talk about how we're going to do it under the table, because that means you're going to have to find out we're going to have to eliminate billions of people on this planet to get it to the place that we need it to get to. And we have to do it in such a way that people don't know that we're doing it. How do you kill someone without them knowing that you're killing them? Well, I think they call them silent weapons. And they've been deployed for decades in our country.
Pandemics.
There are increasing military applications using transhumanism. DARPA has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the creation of enhanced cyborg soldiers through their Augmented Cognition Computer Soldier program. That's something that they're working on now. And why? Because China is working on it. Why? North Korea is working on it. There are countries around the world who are working on this. Iran, Israel. If one country is doing it, the others, if we're going to stay competitive, we're going to have to do it too. What does Revelation say? They will learn war no more. Do you know what a relief that will be for our world? How much money is being spent to sustain our competitive edge around the world? I mean, how many bases can you build around the world to keep control of your competitive edge? Thousands. How many countries are there? And how do you get your base into that country? Oh, I'll give you $100 billion if you'll let us build some bases there. And so on. There's a Department of Defense programs like War Games Command System. It's called SAGE, Semi-Automatic Ground Environment and Unmanned Jet Plane Defense Networks, is using transhumanist concepts to develop that. So Malthusian closed system transhumanism beliefs have now invaded most of the institutions of the world today. This is why unethical and immoral behavior that becomes exposed is no longer a concern. It is justified in order to ensure the long-term survival of our species. Oh yes, and to maximize our profits and minimize our competition. See, there is right now for our country, there's an engineered collapse of America. America is under full-blown attack from multiple vectors: economic, biological weapons, vaccines, political, rigged elections, terraforming or geoengineering. What are those things in the sky called?
Chemtrails.
Chemtrails. Also, putting fluoride in water systems. Oh my gosh. Fluoride is a toxin, a nerve toxin. And they have been putting in the water system in order to give you better teeth. It's never intended to be swallowed in your body. It is okay. I brush with, and I gargle with fluoride, gargle and with toothpaste. I want that because that puts it on my teeth, but I spit it out. You don't drink a toxin, which is a byproduct of the production of aluminum. You don't drink fluoride into your body. I have a very important dentist in my life who still believes that that helps your teeth if you drink fluoride. That's how it's been sold, and he doesn't, you know, his medical authorities in his life always told him that, and that's where he is. So easy to have these things just pawned off on everyone in our world. Food scarcity. Price of a 2x4 right now is close to $9.
We don't need those.
You know, I used to buy them for $1.25. You know how long ago that was? About 6 months.
Yeah.
Why is there such a high price on building materials? Right now, people who have contracted to build houses are canceling contracts and saying we're going to go back to and go to the agreement because now the price has gone up by 25%. We're going to have to redo the bid. Why is all this happening? Is there really a scarcity of building products so that the price has to go up? Or is the scarcity of building products, the coming scarcity of food, is it being controlled to make that happen? The goal is clear. The systematic dismantling of the United States of America, plunging it into chaos and collapse, all while invoking race wars, mass starvation, political unrest, and widespread disease. So what's the conclusion to all of this? What does it all mean? Number one, without a proper evaluation into the historic roots of these ideas that have produced these world leaders and captains of industry, without a proper understanding of those historical roots of those ideas that threaten to derail global civilization into a dystopian collapse, it is impossible to understand anything fundamental about the last 120 years of human experience. Oddly, this is the foundation from which we build our faith. I'll tell you something that the Lord told me when I looked into this that helped me understand why I was having to do it. Because I would look at some of this and I'd say, I can't look at this. I mean, it's too undoing. I can't believe this is actually our world that we're living in now. The more I read, the more I understood, and the more I realized how deep and far and wide this corruption has gone. And I said, Lord, how do I keep doing this? I know when Ellen and I were talking about it, she would just like pull the covers over her head because it was so depressing to her.
You betcha.
Well, here's what the Lord told me. If you want to know the truth that will set you free, you must first unwrap the deception that surrounds it. There's a reason why you shall know the truth and the truth will set you free is not setting you free yet. There's a whole wealth of deception that surrounds the truth that you've been given that you don't understand. And if you don't understand it, then you're easily manipulated by it. You know, complication, I've said this numerous times, complication in this world is inevitable, but confusion is a choice. Usually we don't get unconfused until there's enough pain in our lives to say, all right, now I'm going to look at it because I just can't go on like this. And you look into it again. And then you start to find solutions that you never saw before. We find our hope in what God says about it. So we look into this darkness, we build our foundation of faith upon it, but what do we do with that? Well, here's what we conclude with today. They have challenged God, and now he will respond. Those who think they are unreachable, Isaiah chapter 47, verse 8 and 9. Therefore, hear now this, you who are given to pleasures, who dwell carelessly, who say in your heart, I am, and none else besides me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. But these two things shall come to you in a moment, in one day, the loss of children and widowhood. They shall come upon you in their perfection, for the multitude of your sorceries and for the great abundance of your enhancements. You know, the Greek word for sorcery is pharmakia, pharmacy. It is the flagship of deception that's going on in our world right now through the pharmaceutical entities of our world. They're using that as a sorcery. It's not a medical solution. It's a sorcery designed to control and destroy your life. That's a hard one because when your body needs a medication, it doesn't mean you're buying into the sorcery, but it is the means by which they've surrounded our lives with the necessity of being sick so that we can use their sorcery to maintain our lives, to make our bodies better. What's God's plan? Healing, restoration, deliverance. He brings world rulers down. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 20 to 21. We're building the foundation upon this dark world order. That's our springboard into the truth and to what we can live with. Well, this is one of them. Have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he that sits upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants there are as grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens as a curtain and spreads them out as a tent to dwell in, who brings the princes to nothing. He makes the judges of the earth as vanity. Yes, they shall not be planted. Yes, they shall not be sown. Yes, their stock shall not take root in the earth, and he shall also blow upon them, and they shall wither, and the whirlwind shall take them away as stubble. That's what we build our faith on. These magnificent thinkers of the past and all the global leaders and the captains of industry who have bought into their misperceptions about our world, he is not going to stand by whether they're doing it on purpose or in ignorance. He's not going to stand by to let them get away with this. Once it's now to a global level, once it's now to the place where he is now confronted directly with what they're doing, now that it's there, now he has to respond. He will. He cannot not respond to what they're doing. He will end their economy. You know, when you and I are in debt, that's a liability for us. But debt for those who lend money to us, that's an asset to them. And so when it says he's going to end their economy, it means he's going to end their debt. That's something that the dark world order right now is trying to promote as a great reset. We're going to end the debt, you know, the Nasara Act. We're going to end the debt, wipe it out, tell everybody you're now debt free. The world's going to have to reset its economy. They're trying to suggest that they can do that because they can do it better than God can. And God is saying, whatever they do, you can guarantee one thing. They're doing it in their own interest, and they still want to be the first domino in the stack. They do not want to be the tail. They want to be the head. And if they're promising you a great reset, it's because they're going to use that to make them the absolute controller of this world. And God said, I don't want an absolute control of this world. I want my people to rule this world as I created them to begin with. I created this world for you. I've given you a place that is an absolute paradise. Just because the light of the world has been dimmed does not ruin that. It means that we're now going to turn that light back on. And we're going to turn it into the paradise that it was intended to be. God will avenge his church. Well, regarding their economy, Revelation 18:21, and a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, thus with violence shall that great city Babylon, world economic system, be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the light of the candles shall shine no more at all in you. And listen to this. And the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in you. We're in it right now, and that's why we're affected by it. But it said there's coming time where that's not going to be the case anymore. It says, and for your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by your sorceries, again, there's that word, were all nations deceived. God will avenge his church. Revelation 18:20, rejoice over her, you heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. Jeremiah has very succinct prophecies about this. Jeremiah 5:26-29, for among my people are found wicked men. They lay wait as he that sets snares. They set a trap, they catch men. As a cage is full of birds, so are their houses full of deceit. Therefore, they become great and become rich. They become fat, they shine. Yes, they overpass the deeds of the wicked. They judge not and cause the cause of the fatherless. Yet they prosper, and the right of the needy they do not judge. Shall I not visit these things, says the Lord? Shall not my soul be avenged on such a nation as this? Jeremiah, chapter 30, verse 16 says, therefore all they that devour you shall be devoured, and all your adversaries, every one of them, shall go into captivity. And they that spoil you shall be a spoil, and they that prey upon you will I give you for a prey. That's what we build our faith on. They're doing that to us. That's not the end game. It's going to be flipped. The ownership of this planet is about to change. And my favorite, Haggai 20, chapter 2, verse 20. I will shake the heavens and the earth, and I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms, and I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the heathen. And I will overthrow the chariots and those that ride in them, and the horses and the riders shall come down every one by the sword of his own brother. You know, I have over 100 of these prophecies that I have categorized and collected. I put it under a heading called Global Zionism Judged. But I've got 100 of them in there. Too many to count. I just bring them out every now and then on some of these presentations to you guys. But they all say the same thing. So what are we to do? We live by faith with the truth of this, even before it happens. I know you can't go to the grocery store and buy groceries with that. As George Bailey says, it comes in pretty handy down here, bub. But at the same time, there is a wealth being managed carefully by the Lord Jesus Christ on this earth in each of our lives. And sometimes we like to think, why do you have to be so strict with me? And that's only the enemy whispering. Blame God for it. Don't blame me. I'm the one making I'm the one causing it in your life, but let's blame God for it because he's not doing enough for you about it. Well, he's about to. The wealth of the sinner is coming to the just. And the wealth and the prosperity of this earth is about to be turned over to the Church of Jesus Christ.